Like the thumbnail says, this is not Minecraft. I have had a lot of fun with Minecraft over the years, from when I was about 12 and even up till now at 24. All of my playtime so far has been on console, which means no mods. So, after playing Minecraft off and on for all these years, naturally, I start to get burnt out on it, and on my search for more Minecraft, I found something. I'm Sam the Ashen, and this is Vintage Story. Vintage Story is an open world sandbox survival game that looks almost identical to Minecraft, but the gameplay is a lot different in many ways, but the core idea is the same. Explore a massive open world that is dangerous and beautiful, becoming more powerful as you discover the moving parts of the world and eventually make it your home. As I mentioned, the gameplay in Vintage Story is much different than Minecraft, and overall I would have to say it is much more detailed as far as customization and crafting and building and things like that goes. One of the core things you'll notice right away is instead of just clicking a button to craft something, you actually have to chisel out the shape pixel by pixel to shape it into the right item. This goes for tools as well as making pottery. After you sculpt the pottery, you then have to create a pit and place raw pottery into the pit, then fill it with grass and sticks and firewood, and then light it and let the pottery actually harden. This should give you a pretty good idea of how different and detailed the gameplay is. The gameplay overall is really challenging. It's definitely hard to survive at first for a lot of people, including myself. There is also pretty solid in-depth tutorial to show you the basics of the game, as well as a handbook to show you every concept, item, and recipe, which is super useful. It has its own hotkey. I used it plenty of times. Also, luckily, there are options for easier or peaceful if that is something that you want. There are two main enemies that you see in the majority of the time, which are zombie-type creatures called drifters that come out at night or spawn in low light level locations like caves. They're not too tough on their own, but they're usually not alone and they're in packs and can be pretty tough to deal with. The other main enemy is the wildlife and nature itself. There are wolves and bears and even foxes can attack you if they're cornered and kill you if you push your luck. The game is definitely unforgiving, but it does do a great job of making you feel like you accomplished something important whenever you do manage to make a step in progression. There is a story in Vintage Story, and from what I've played and seen and also read, so far you wake up in a world basically overrun by the drifters, who are malevolent or evil creatures stuck wandering the land. The only friendly beings besides some of the animals are the merchant NPCs that have managed to survive. They use gears as currency, and you can get these gears in caves or by trading with the merchants. There is a mechanic called temporal stability, which is kind of like your sanity, which will drop when certain things happen, like if you get too close to a rift portal in which drifters come out, or if you stay down in the caves for too long. And then if it drops to 0, you shift into the rust world, which is like another dimension of this world that is corrupted and filled with drifters, and you constantly take damage. Now in Minecraft you have the Nether, which is an entirely new world to explore, and seeing the Nether for the first time, there's really nothing like it. The rust world is the equivalent to this for Vintage Story. Unfortunately, it isn't finished or implemented into the game yet, but it's supposed to be put in the future. To be honest, it was when I found this out that I started to lose interest in the game. I do plan on going back to the game in the future when more things are released, especially the rust world. One of my favorite things about Minecraft is starting with nothing and then slowly getting more powerful, getting ready to take on stronger enemies, and going to new unexplored places that I wasn't strong enough to go before. This is something that I think Vintage Story lacks because there's no real endgame yet, besides being self-sufficient and building whatever it is you want to build. To the game's credit, there is a lot of things to build and create and craft and design, And some people will and already do love this, and if you are one of the people that like to focus on building and creating what you set out to do, Vintage Story has a ton to offer you. Even if you're not one of these people, you'll probably still get a lot of fun out of this game if you enjoy Minecraft or any games like that. There is a lot to do in the early game and the mid game, and although it can feel a bit stretched out at times in the early game, the devs did an amazing job creating something really complex to master, but still fairly easy to start playing. Vintage Story came out in 2016, and while reading through some of the update records, you can see that it has been updated with one thing or another almost every month from when it came out in 2016 to now in 2024. A lot of these updates are small, but some of them are big, and it's easy to see that the game is slowly but surely getting better and better. It's pretty impressive the amount of updates and consistency the devs have put forth so far. It's a pretty small team as far as I'm aware, definitely an indie game, so well done. And I'm assuming it has more support and tools now more than ever, which hopefully means updates will continue and the game will keep growing. Another reassuring sign of all the support this game has is the amount of good mods that are available for the game on the game's website. I think at the time of recording there is more than 1,500 mods for the game, and some of them are even total overhauls of the game. Just a few that I downloaded were Tame Your Own Wolf, backpack extensions, and a few more. But I didn't even download a lot of the good ones, like Medieval Building, that adds a ton of new styles of blocks to make your own fortress with, which you can already do in the game, but this mod adds even more customization and things like drawbridges. I'm getting a little carried away with the mods, but it was really cool to see all the great mods that people had made for what seems like a relatively uncommon indie game. Another important part of any sandbox survival game is the combat. Unfortunately, opinions seem to be pretty mixed on combat, but as far as I can tell, the general consensus is that combat does its job well enough, but it definitely has a lot of room to improve on. The main complaint that I saw from people was the weapon physics and the hitbox detection. There's even a mod that claims to fix the combat and fix the hitbox detection. For me at least, it never felt so bad that I had to download a mod for it, but that's definitely subjective, so it's going to be a bit different for everybody. It does say something, just the fact that there's a mod made to fix this problem, so take that for what it's worth. I will say the main problems that I noticed with the hitbox was hitting an enemy. Some hits looked or felt like they should have connected but didn't. And of course that's frustrating, but I didn't notice it very many times. And there weren't many times where something looked like it shouldn't have hit me but did, if that makes sense. But there's still a lot to improve on. Just like crafting and building, there is a ton of different weapons and weapon variety. There are things like spears and swords and clubs and bow and arrows. There's even a mod that adds guns to the game. So although the combat mechanics do need some work, they still do the job well enough. There's a ton of variety when it comes to weapon choice. When you start the game, you have different classes to choose from, such as the hunter, the malefactor, the peasant, and a few more, which definitely implies that there should be a good amount of build variety. There is some amount of build variety, but this is totally gear based, which can either be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what you prefer. I personally prefer the skill point route. Sorry to mention it again, but it's worth noting that there is mods to add skills and attributes to the game so that you can level up and spend attribute points. For gear setups, there are things like armor for each body part, and then accessory slots like necklaces. Then different necklaces give different boosts, and different armor grant protections, but also come with certain debuffs like heavy armor giving you more protection, but also making you move slower. I think this is a nice touch of realism, although I could see it being annoying to some people, especially if you're playing single player. You don't want to be lugging around the map, you want to move normally. Luckily, there is a ton of different settings that you can adjust. You can really get down into the details. For example, you can change your walk speed, you can raise it up to get around the world faster if you find the game too slow. So some complaints of the game being too slow or too hard can pretty much be moved aside by adjusting the settings to how you want to play the game. I mentioned single player before because yes, there is also multiplayer, where you play on servers with other people living in the world. I haven't actually played multiplayer, but from what I've seen people say, most people seem to enjoy it. Whether that's working together to build villages and overcome the unforgiving nature of the game, or to not work together, as usual in multiplayer servers for most games, and just PvP your way to the top. As I mentioned before, the combat is pretty average at best, but with games like these where you can carry around a stack of different blocks, you can definitely use strategy to your advantage to get the upper hand in conflicts. Moving on, mining is a whole mechanic in and of itself where you're basically stuck with stone tools until you manage to find enough surface copper to melt down and pour into a copper pickaxe mold that you made yourself out of pottery clay, pixel by pixel. And while you're at it, go ahead and make a prospecting pick. That way you can go underground to actually find more ore. The prospecting pick is like a node detector, and some people compare it to a mini game itself because of everything that goes into it. I'm not going to explain it here because that would take far too long, and I'm not even a master at it myself. There is a ton to learn about this game, even with just mining and prospecting. For example, maybe you don't want to run around and look for copper bits and you'd rather make a wooden tray to pan and sift through the sand and gravel to find your metal bits. I think this is a really cool mechanic and gives players different routes to the same goal. I don't think giving the game a number rating would really help you decide if you want to buy this game or not, so I will just say that the game is pretty sweet, and if you like Minecraft or if you like open world survival sandbox games, there is a really good chance that you will have a lot of fun with vintagestory. If you don't like either of those things, then well, you probably won't like vintagestory, to be honest. It might still be worth a try, but I don't know. The game is only $18 on the vintagestory website, so it's not a huge investment. I know that's not super cheap, but compared to the $60 and $70 games that we get sometimes, it's not too bad. The amount of hours that you will get out of this game if you enjoy this genre is pretty spectacular. I don't think there's much more I can go over without getting too deep into the game. It's really something that is worth checking out yourself, especially if you enjoy Minecraft or games that help as a creative outlet. I'm still pretty new to the game, so if anyone watching is already playing vintagestory, feel free to give me your thoughts in the comments, and if you don't play, let me know if you're going to check it out. I appreciate you watching the video, and if you enjoyed it, taking the time to leave a like or a comment really does help a lot. Every person counts. If you want to see more from me, I post every other Sunday, so if you do subscribe, I'll never clog up your feed. Hope you have a good one. Peace out.